Good evening friends, you are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Today we are going to discuss Social Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU MANE003 Comparative Ethnography. And our topic is Developmental Anthropology. Contents are introduction part, then we will discuss theoretical part of which the ethnography India's changing villages, human factors in community development is an example. Description of the ethnography, there are four parts: intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data and the conclusion. After that, how does the ethnography advance our understanding? Then we will discuss theoretical part of which the ethnography, capitalism, primitive and modern, some aspect of Totai, some aspects of Tolai economic growth is an example. After that, we will discuss description of the ethnography. There are four parts: intellectual context, fieldwork, analysis of data, and the conclusion part. After that, we will discuss how does the ethnography advance our understanding. At the last, we will discuss the summary. Learning objectives are: this unit will introduce you to the concept of the development, how anthropologists have studied the notion of development, and a comparative study of development in different contexts. Introduction: Development anthropology refers to the application of anthropological perspectives to the multidisciplinary branch of development studies. It takes international development and international aid as primary objects. In this branch of anthropology, the term development refers to the social action made by different agents, institutions, businesses, enterprise, states, independent volunteers who are trying to modify the economic, technical, political, and social life of an given place in the world especially to impoverished, formerly colonized regions. Development anthropologists share a commitment to simultaneously critique and contribute to projects and institutions that create and administer Western projects that seek to improve the economic well being of the most marginalized and to eliminate their poverty. While some theorists distinguish between the anthropology of development, in which development is the object of study, and development anthropology as an applied practice, this distinction is increasingly thought of as obsolete. With researchers on the field, the anthropologists can describe, analyze, and understand the different actions of development that took and take place in a given place. The various impacts on the local population, environment, social, and economic life are to be examined. To understand the concept of development and factors contributing to it, we will focus on the ethnographic work, that is, first India's Changing Villages, Human Factors in Community Development by S.C. Dove, and Capitalism, Primitive and Modern, some aspect of Tolai Economic Growth by T. Scarlett Epstein for the unit. Theoretical part of which the ethnography India's Changing Villages, Human Factors in Community Development is an example. Indian village was not a stagnant entity as was believed by colonial officers. It was constantly changing, although the pace of change varied from one village to another. Dubey's work is a contribution to the understanding of the processes and products of the change in rural India. Description of the ethnography. This volume, as a product of research work, owes much to co-workers and associates at the Karnal Field Station in the western UP, India. The aim of this study was to examine some of the important human factors involved in externally induced and state-directed programs of economic development and culture change in a technologically underdeveloped society. The analyses presented here are qualitative rather than quantitative. The universe of the project was a single community development block, and there too, attention was focused mainly on two villages, and the author hoped that the problems and conclusion emerging out of the study will have, generally speaking, some validity for similar projects elsewhere in India. Intellectual context. In the second half of the 20th century, rural India was being exposed to a larger number of changes being introduced from outside. The issue was the changes that came in society and their impact on the traditional institutions. Fieldwork was conducted using qualitative research methodology. Fieldwork involved the use of techniques of observation and interview. Case studies were also collected. Analysis of data. The political division of the country had left numerous tangled questions unsolved, caused considerable bloodshed and rioting, and brought into the country a large number of uprooted people. The consolidation of the Union of India and the integration of these princely states was one of the major tasks before the country. The antiquated land system, with several intermediary tax collectors between the peasants and the government, was crying for reform. For the last few decades, there has been considerable awareness of the importance of planning in India. In 1938, the Indian National Congress appointed a National Planning Committee to examine the resources of the nation and prepare plans for its reconstruction. The National Planning Committee of the Indian National Congress had worked under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru for a number of years. Because of certain political developments and generally unsettled conditions in the country, it did not have an uninterrupted career. Although it could not come out with a comprehensive plan, it did much pioneering work by exploring the fundamental economic problems of the country and by examining the possibility of preparing a coordinated plan for national economic regeneration. A rural development project in action, the people. As a part of the National Community Development Program, the government of Uttar Pradesh selected, among others, a group of villages in one of the western districts of the state for intensive development. The project to be launched in this area was not to be of standard type of community development project comprising three blocks each consisting of nearly 100 villages, nor was it to be a rural cum urban project. The selected villages were to be constituted into a community development block. At first, only 120 villages were selected for the inclusion of the block, but later, on ground of public demand and administrative convenience, 33 more villages were added to the list. Around the middle of the 1953, preparatory work was started and the project itself was inaugurated by the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh on 2nd October 1953. The area covered by this project was wholly rural. In fact, with the exception of the town in which the headquarters of the project was located, there were no other urban settlements in the area, and the headquarters town itself was excluded from the project's operations. Judged by average Indian standards and judged by average Indian standards, the 150 villages in the development block were quite advanced agriculturally and economically. Besides its tie with the headquarters of the project, an old semi-rural settlement and center of the grain trade, this area has immediate connections with two other cities. One of these is the seat of the district of which the development block is a part, and other is the seat of an adjoining district, while the people have administrative connections only with the distinct district headquarters, mainly villages which were geographically nearer to the other district town naturally looked to it for its market, medical and educational facilities. There was a small government dispensary at the project headquarters and larger and comparatively better equipped hospitals as well as several highly qualified private medical practitioners in the two district towns. Two important types of village settlements were found in the area. Some single settlement villages, others nucleated villages. The society was caste structured and the economy was mainly agricultural. The Rajputs, Tyagis, Jats, and Gurjars were the important land owing cultural agricultural caste of the region. These castes were found among the both Hindus and Muslims. the relative position and strength of the caste often determined the character and organization of village. The social organization of the village communities was determined by the interplay of several different kinds of solidarities. Kinship, caste, and territorial affinities were the major determinants that shaped their structure and the organization. Caste was perhaps the most important single organizing principle in those communities, and it governs to a very considerable degree the organization of kinship and territorial units. In that kind of social division, the different segments were kept apart by complex observances related to the concept of ritual pollution. The caste divisions were regarded as divinely ordained and were hierarchically graded. The differences between various segments were defined by tradition and it was regarded as permanent. In recent decades, a number of forces and factors have influenced the caste system and have brought about significant modification in its forms and functioning. Development of modern means of communication, urban contexts, modern education, and movements of social reforms such as the Arya Samaj and the Gandhi's campaign against untouchability were important factors affecting caste system, notwithstanding considerable propaganda in favor of breaking down the barriers of caste. It still remains its endogamous character. However, rules governing commensality and interpersonal relations between castes have been greatly modified. In regard to these, a dual character of behavior is gradually coming to be recognized. Adherence to traditional forms was considered desirable and necessary in the village, but persons going from the village to urban areas stick moderately to city ways. Of course, when they return to the village, they generally return to the local traditions, project achievements, and its response. Although the ideal of the community development projects was to work for the many sided development of the entire community, from the work being done in two villages, it was clear that the best organized activities were confined to the field of agricultural extension and consequently the group of agriculturists benefited the most from them. The benefit went to the elite group and to the more affluent and influential agriculturists. The gains to poorer agriculturists were considerably smaller. Being suspicious of government officials, they did not seek help from the project as often. For the economic development of this group as well as for that of the artisan and agricultural laborers, no programs were initiated by the project. Some programs for the welfare of women, younger people, and touchables were undertaken, but their organization lacked the imagination and consequently they failed to make the desired impact. In the sphere of public health and sanitation, some significant steps were taken, but they only touched the surface of the problem. They were far below the needs of the community and did not in any appreciable measure change the attitude and outlook of the people towards nutrition, hygiene, and health. The social education program made the least impact. It was treated as a stepchild and was started more as a formal obligation than for its basic aims of awakening the community to its own needs. An analysis of the motivation of village people in accepting the project sponsored programs shows that they offered their cooperation mainly for the following reasons: the economic advantage and convenience, prestige of the individual, family, kin group, caste, and village, novelty of innovations, compliance to the wishes of government and village leaders, the main obstacle in the way of the greater acceptance of the program were the general apathy of a considerable part of the village population, suspicion and distrust of officials and outsiders, failure on the part of project to evolve effective and adequate media of communication, tradition and cultural factors. These factors have vitally affected the implementation of the program. State officials as agents of change by setting up the orientation and training programs and by making a conscious effort to evolve a set of operational principles to guide the officials engaged in development activities. The planners have shown both foresight and a genuine interest in equipping the officials to function as agents of change. Through periodical publications and seminars and conferences, the government has tried to evaluate the success of its plans and had provided a forum for exchange and communication of ideas. To the credit of the planners, it must be said that they have not hesitated to deviate boldly from established practices where the need or wisdom of such a departure was indicated. Human factors involved in the change over from the old pattern of organization and methods of work can now be appraised empirically. This experience should enable the planners and the administrators of the development program to devise more effective training programs and alter the administrative machinery suitably. Planning so far appears to be from the top to down because of the undue curbs on project's autonomy. Its officials hesitated to demonstrate much initiative. Was what was worse, they tended on the official level to accept order from above, that is from state headquarters, without question or comment, and this often despite pronounced private reservations. As an outcome of this trend, the officials were oriented less towards the village people and more towards the pleasing of their official superiors. Sympathetic but honest evaluation could wean the official away from the kind of self deception that a quest after impressive records as such sometimes entails. It could help towards a better definition of ends as well as towards a development of suitable means for attaining them. Only through insights provided by such work can we hope to transform bureaucrats into agents of change. Problems of communication. The process of communication has been identified in one sentence as who says what to whom, how, with what effect, between the originators of ideas, innovations, and programs and the audience to whom they are addressed. They are significant factors of content, method, and mechanism. The methods of communicating the program to the villages recommended in the development literature and emphasized in the training of the official can be classified under three main categories: contact, demonstration, participation. People's participation. Several methods were adopted to communicate the program to the people. Important among them were slogans, pictures and posters, pamphlets and publication, movies, tournaments and competitions, exhibitions and conferences, propaganda meetings, fraternization, visits by dignitaries, meetings and speeches, social education classes and community centers, group discussion and individual contacts, camps and sightseeing tours, and worked with local agents of communication. The ultimate outcome of the process, what effect, is determined as much by certain cultural factors as by intermediate factors of communication in the context of the societies like the one to which this study refers. The factors as well as the processes and results in Results of communication are governed and influenced by the cultural predisposition, cultural screens, and processes of cultural adaptation in the community to which the message is addressed. An understanding of these factors is of vital significance for the successful implementation of the development program. Cultural factors in community development. There has been a growing realization among the rural extension experts and technical assistance workers that even some of the less involved technological or economic innovations have latent cultural and social dimensions that need careful considerations if the success of these programs is to be assured. From this study, a number of points emerged that illustrate the range and effectiveness of cultural factors influencing such programs. Habits and taste. The habits and taste of the people have determined the initial response of the community to a large number of innovations and programs promoted by the community development project. The improved varieties of wheat seeds promoted by the project were in the beginning not very enthusiastically received by the community because of their flat taste and also largely because of the difficulties women folk experienced in using flour from them to make the conventional type of unleavened bread. Social practices and tradition. When it comes down to establish social practices, neither appeals on scientific grounds nor logic can easily persuade the village people to give up their traditional life ways. As a part of program, the village level workers got compost pits dug outside the settlements in a number of villages. The local village council passed resolution making it obligatory for the villagers to use these pits. However, most of these pits remains unused. Cultural factors explain the failure on the part of the people to use them. Traditionally, it was the work of the women to clean the house and the cattle shed and deposit refuse and dung in one corner of the courtyard or in an open space near the house, while women of even the highest caste can do this kind of work at their homes. Those belonging to the highest caste are not expected to be seen carrying loads from their houses all the way to compost pits on the outskirts of the village. Men could not do so because culturally such a task is defined as women's work, as very few families could afford to engage servants to do this work. The traditional practice was never seriously threatened and continues. The area of belief. The state has been actively promoting programs to introduce better methods of cattle breeding, but without much success. The agriculturalists recognize the importance of good draft cattle and indeed invest large sums of money in buying animals of good breed, but locally they cannot do much to change the methods of cattle breeding because of the presence in the village of a large number of scrub bulls. Scrub bulls. The government has distributed free or at subsidized rates a large number of pedigree bulls in the area, but they are not much help because no effective ways can be devised to dispose of the scrub bulls, being the amount of Lord Shiva. A bull is regarded as sacred. Traditional practices rooted in beliefs offer obstacles to the acceptance of a wide range of programs in the field of rural health and hygiene and of practices connected with maternity and child rear. Social structure. The interplay of factors affecting programs of directed change in the general area of the social structure is extremely complex. In this sphere, it is necessary to take account of social segmentation and stratification, role differentiation in terms of age, sex, and types and levels of leaderships, and vital factors of group dynamics and functionalism within the community. Welfare measures among untouchables were adversely criticized by the upper caste as politically motivated steps for vote getting that developed distributing developed disturbing notions among the untouchables. Let us repeat this. Welfare measures among untouchables were adversely criticized by the upper caste as politically motivated steps for vote getting that developed disturbing notions among the untouchables. The presence of women from the untouchable caste in the adult education classes started by the project in an important village of the development block resulted in the boycott of the class by the women of the upper caste. Age and experience are considered as desirable, often a necessary attribute of positions of leadership and influence. As a consequence of this norm, measures initiated by the project always need the blessings and support of the more tradition bound elders. Projects initiated and run by the younger age groups are viewed as temporary developments of minor significance and are rarely taken seriously by the community. This has to be considered in the selection of the local agents of change and the initiation of projects with long range effects. Attitudes and values. In respect to attitudes, it is necessary to consider the village people's view of change. Does the village people consider it necessary and desirable? Then it is useful to find out their attitude towards the promoters of change. Do the people trust them, or do they have any misgivings about their motivations? Finally, it is necessary to determine the attitude of the people to the actual action program and to the methods adopted for implementing it. Indicative of the divergence are the two extremes of thought, one hoping that a free Indian government will undo the evil influence of an alien government and will re-establish the society on its traditional foundations by recognizing and enforcing the relative statuses of different castes, and another reflected in the thinking of the politically conscious leaders of the lower caste that the government will take active steps to eradicate the barriers separating the high caste from the low caste and rich from the poor. Let us repeat this. Attitudes and values. In respect to attitudes, it is necessary to consider the village people's view of change. Does the village people consider it necessary and desirable? Then it is useful to find out their attitude towards the promoters of change. Do the people trust them, or do they have any misgivings about their motivations? Finally, it is necessary to determine the attitude of the people to the actual action program and to the methods adopted for implementing it. Indicative of the divergence are the two extremes of thought, one hoping that a free Indian government will undo the evil influence of an alien government and will re-establish the society on its traditional foundations by recognizing and enforcing the relative statuses of different castes, and another reflected in the thinking of the politically conscious leaders of the lower caste that the government will take active steps to eradicate the barriers separating the high caste from the low caste and the rich from the poor. Conclusion part. In conclusion, it may be said that in devising action programs of community development, especially in their educational aspect, it is necessary to keep in mind the cultural factors that vitally influence their acceptance or rejections by the people. Many programs are rejected not because the people are traditional, conservative, or primitive, but because the innovations in all their ramifications do not fit into the total cultural settings of the community. A balanced and critical evaluation of the motivators and mechanism of change in these societies, together with the analysis of the cultural determinants of acceptance and rejection, can provide fruitful insight towards better planning and execution of development programs. How does the ethnography advance our understanding? The ethnography abun- abundantly tells us that cultural factors are extremely important in affecting the programs of development. The planners and development specialists should keep in mind those factors.